Before Walmart, before Amazon, there was Main Street, where every handshake meant something, and the butcher knew your name. What happened to that world? And rubbing alcohol. And the pharmacist was someone you trusted with more than just prescriptions. He knew your grandkids' names and how long you'd been nursing that cough. These were stores owned by neighbors, not shareholders. The woman who sold you shoes had watched your kids grow, sizing their feet year after year for school. The man behind the bakery counter knew exactly how your wife liked her cinnamon rolls. Trust wasn't written in police, it lived in the space between people, built over years of face-to-face kindness. Children wandered safely from shop to shop, coins clutched in hand for a piece of licorice or a soda pop. No one worried. Adults lingered on sidewalks, sharing stories, unhurried by clocks. Birthday cakes were ordered from the same bakery that had baked your own childhood cake. Graduation suits came from the tailor who stitched your father's. There was a rhythm to Main Street, a rhythm that made time feel rich, not rushed. The air wasn't filled with two-day shipping and next-hour pickup, but with the scent of warm bread and shoe polish, the shuffle of footsteps, the hum of community. And at the center of it all was a feeling we didn't know we'd miss until it was gone. The comfort of being known. Main Street didn't just remember your name. It remembered who you were. But time doesn't stand still, and neither did America's way of shopping. It started with smaller, bigger stores, bigger parking lots. At first, it was exciting. But it would change everything. By the mid-1960s, the American landscape was shifting, and Main Street began to feel the first tremors. The suburbs were growing. Families were moving farther from downtown, drawn by new housing developments, open space, and the promise of a quieter life. With that movement came a need for new ways to shop, ways that matched the faster, more spread-out rhythms of suburban living. At first, it was the bigger grocery stores. Then came the discount department stores with sliding glass doors and fluorescent lights. These new stores sat on the edges of towns, surrounded by acres of asphalt. Parking, once a scattered scramble on downtown side streets, was now easy and free. The stores were spacious, brightly lit, and most importantly, cheap. People were drawn to the variety. Instead of stopping at the butcher, then the baker, then the drugstore, they could do it all in one place. One cart, one line, one stop. The efficiency was intoxicating. By the 1970s, shopping malls began to spring up across the country, offering not just stores, but food courts, fountains, and air conditioning. They became the new hangouts, especially for teenagers, who once might have loitered by the jukebox at the soda shop. Malls gave them space, options, and the feeling of modernity. It was shiny, it was new, and it was far from Main Street. Infrastructure followed the trend. Roads widened, the sidewalks disappeared. Shopping, once done on foot, now required a car. The intimacy of walking from shop to shop gave way to sprawling lots and strip malls, where nobody knew your name and nobody asked. For a while, the change didn't feel like a loss. It felt like progress. Who wouldn't want lower prices and more choices? Who wouldn't trade a dusty corner shop for something bigger, brighter, better stocked? But slowly, something else shifted. The conversations got shorter. The shopkeepers turned into cashiers. The community became customers. What had started as convenience began to erase the very things that had made shopping personal. But before the giants claimed the edge of town, they quietly set up shop on Main Street itself. Woolworths had grilled cheese. Jack Penny had creaky floors. Even the chains once felt like home. Long before corporate logos towered over highways, early chain stores settled quietly into the fabric of small-town life. They didn't bulldoze Main Street. They blended in. Their signs were modest. Their storefronts matched the neighboring shops with brick facades, striped awnings, and big windows that let the morning sun spill across rows of polished display cases. Inside, they felt familiar. The clerks were locals, neighbors, classmates, and cousins. You didn't call a 1-800 number for help. You just walked in and waved at someone who probably knew your size, your taste, and maybe even your birthday. Woolworth's wasn't just a store, it was part of the town's heartbeat. Its lunch counter sat at the center of daily life, where people share booths, sip coffee, and swap stories over simple grilled cheese sandwiches and slices of pie. Teenagers gathered there after school. Elderly couples claimed their usual stools. Mothers brought children for a treat after ends. It was loud with conversation, not announcements. It smelled of coffee, not cleaning chemicals. Even the bigger names, like Jack Penny and Sears, felt rooted in something human. There was pride in working there. Salespeople dressed neatly, often with a carnation pinned to their collar, and helped customers with real care. Layaway was common, and people paid in person, sometimes over months. It wasn't about transactions. It was about relationships. The buildings themselves told a story. No two looked quite the same. Many were housed in historic downtown structures, where the wooden floors creaked and ceiling fans spun lazily overhead. The signage might have been national, but the feeling inside was unmistakably local. Store managers were often born and raised just down the street. In those days, chains didn't replace mom-and-pop stores. They stood beside them. They operated with the same rhythm and values. There was still time for small talk at the register, still room for handwritten price tags, still a sense that your presence mattered. These stores didn't just sell products. They helped anchor identity. People remembered the clerk who found the perfect dress for their graduation, or the counter where they shared their first milkshake. For all their branding and backroom inventory systems, these chains still managed to feel like an extension of the town itself. But it wasn't long before these beloved names followed the money and the cars. The superstores didn't just sell more, they redefined what shopping meant in America. By the 1980s and 90s, a new kind of store had taken over the horizon. They were massive. They glowed at night like warehouses lit from within. Walmart, Target, Kmart. They didn't just arrive. They expanded, swallowing acres of land with their sprawling parking lots and fluorescent interiors. For many communities, they were exciting at first. Clean, bright, organized, full of choices. But beneath the polished linoleum floors, something deeper was shifting. These big box stores weren't stitched into the fabric of towns. They were dropped in, identical from one zip code to the next. Whether you were in Kansas or Connecticut, the aisles looked the same. The signs were the same. The music, the layout, even the smell of plastic and processed goods is all repeated. Familiar, yes, but also strangely empty. Gone were the creaky floors and shopkeepers who remembered your name. In their place stood towering shelves, endless product rows, and workers trained to stick to scripts. There was no room for small talk, no time for the gentle pace of connection. Interactions became quick, transactional, forgettable. Self-checkout lanes replaced the smiling cashier. Return counters became battlegrounds of policy and procedure. The human element, once so central to Main Street, began to vanish behind barcodes and price match guarantees. With their size came leverage. Big box stores could undercut prices, squeeze suppliers, and stay open late into the night. Local shops couldn't keep up. The bakery that knew your birthday closed. The hardware store that loaned tools disappeared. The family-run clothing store couldn't compete with discount racks that stretched 100 feet long. Town by town, the face of American commerce began to flatten. Local identity gave way to national uniformity. The storefronts that once made each main street feel distinct were replaced by logos you could spot from the highway. The warmth and familiarity of shopping turned into a routine course of mething to check off a list. Sure, it was cheaper, faster, more convenient. But the cost wasn't only economic, it was emotional. 1,000 small goodbyes happened across the country, unnoticed by quarterly reports or advertising campaigns. And in the quiet left behind, something was lost that couldn't be scanned or restocked. And once the giants left, Main Street began to fade store by store, window by window. The barber closed. The bell on the door stopped ringing. And just like that, Main Street went quiet. It didn't happen overnight. First, the hours got shorter. Then, the windows darkened. One by one, the lights flickered out of stores that had stood for decades suddenly gone, their names still faintly visible above dusty awnings. The barber who had cut generations of hair finally retired. The bakery that once filled the air with the smell of cinnamon rolls put a handwritten note on the door. Thank you for 42 wonderful years. They couldn't compete. Not with prices set by corporations 1,000 miles away. Not with rent that kept rising as foot traffic vanished. Family-run shops, once pillars of the community, were slowly pushed out not just by cost, but by time itself. Younger generations moved away. The customers who remained had fewer reasons to linger. As the people left, so did the paint. Storefronts began to peel. Sidewalks cracked and weeds pushed through. Window displays turned into dusty echoes of what used to be faded mannequins dressed in last decade's clothes, paper signs curling at the corners. Some buildings were simply boarded up, their doors chained shut like forgotten promises. It wasn't just about the economy. It was about connection, about ritual, the small habits that gave life shape, stopping at the drugstore for a card, chatting with the grocer about the weather, catching up with neighbors in line. Those moments vanished. What replaced them was space quid, empty space. For older residents, the change felt like erasure. The places they grew up with, raised families in, brought their grandkids to go. They had spent a lifetime investing in the heart of their town. Now it stood hollow. And with every closure, a part of them seemed to close too. Main streets that once bustled with foot traffic and laughter began to resemble movie sets after filming rap still, silent and eerily preserved. The benches sat empty. The lampposts cast light on nothing at all. This wasn't just a story of retail loss. It was the unraveling of identity. A generation who'd grown up walking everywhere, knowing everyone, now found themselves surrounded by locked doors and unfamiliar faces. The rhythms that once anchored life's Saturday errands, spontaneous greetings, the slow joy of bumping into someone you knew disappeared. But it wasn't just stores we lost. It was something deeper. We gained speed, but lost our stories. Was it really worth it? Modern life promised us more choices, more savings, more convenience. We got 24-hour stores, drive-thrus, curbside pickup, and next-day delivery. And yet, somewhere in the rush, something quiet but important disappeared. Shopping stopped being an experience. It became a task, a box to check. A click, a scan, a tap on the screen. What used to be a slow ritual walk downtown, a shared moment, a familiar face turned into isolated errands. Instead of talking with someone who remembered your birthday or asked about your kids, you're now more likely to tap checkout and track a package. The warmth drained out of the process, leaving only function behind. And with that loss came something harder to define, a kind of emotional detachment. When stores became bigger, brighter, faster, they also became colder. The people behind the counters were strangers. The stores themselves, identical from town to town, no longer held meaning. A trip to the store once sparked small moments of joy. Now, it's a blur. It's easy to forget how much family memory used to be tied to place. The dress you bought for your first school dance, the toy you begged for all year, the soda you shared with your grandfather at the lunch counter after Sunday church. These weren't just purchases. They were memories anchored by time, space, and connection. Today, those memories are harder to come by. Convenience has its price, and it's not always paid in dollars. It's paid in lost traditions, in fading rituals, and children growing up without knowing what it feels like to have a shopkeeper remember their name. The emotional cost has been subtle, but real. Awe. More people report feeling isolated, anonymous, even in the middle of crowded stores or behind glowing screens. We know what we want. We get it fast, but we don't feel much in the process. And in that trade-off, something vital slipped through our fingers. America's shopping culture once told a story of community, trust, shared experiences. Now it's often a story of detachment. In chasing progress, we streamlined the soul right out of it. And just when Main Street thought it couldn't get worse, something even bigger arrived. Then came Amazon, and the store in your town became a website. In the late 1990s, a new kind of shopping arrived, and it didn't need a storefront. All it needed was a screen. At first, it was books, then electronics, then everything. Amazon, eBay, and a wave of online retailers promised what Main Street couldn't. Infinite selection, low prices, and delivery to your door without leaving the couch. People adapted fast. Why drive across town when you could tap a button? Why wait for the store to open when the website never closes? E-commerce exploded, reshaping consumer habits almost overnight. And with each passing year, the shift accelerated. Local stores struggled. Some tried websites of their own. Others couldn't keep up. They lost foot traffic, then sales, then the ability to stay open at all. Even giants began to crumble. Sears, once the largest retailer in America, filed for bankruptcy. Radio Shack, once a hub of electronics and curiosity, vanished. Toys R Us, a childhood rite of passage, became a memory almost as fast as it faded from the mall. The younger generations never really knew a world without online shopping. For millennials and Gen Z, convenience was the norm, not a luxury. They grew up in an era where the store came to them, not the other way around. One-click checkout, same-day delivery, virtual try-ons. Shopping became frictionless, faceless, and fast. As speed increased, tangibility decreased. Items arrived in boxes with no human touch, no handshake, no smile. Local flavor became rare. Most towns began to share the same delivery trucks, the same packaging, the same sense of distance from what they bought. And while the world applauded efficiency, something else was disappearing. The tactile joy of browsing, the weight of a conversation, the surprise of stumbling across something you didn't know you needed. In-person commerce became a niche, specialty, almost quaint. Main Street, once bruised by big box stores, now found itself ghosted by a digital revolution it couldn't even see coming. The final blow didn't arrive with bulldozers. It came through fiber optic cables and mobile apps. By the 2010s, the idea of going shopping meant something entirely different. It was no longer a social act. It was a solitary click. Fast, predictable, emotionless. But just as it all seemed lost, something surprising began to happen. A new generation is discovering the charm of old storefronts and breathing life into the past. After decades of decline, something unexpected began to stir in the quiet corners of forgotten downtowns. The boarded-up shops, the faded signs, the ghostly stillness of Main Street, they started to catch the eye of young dreamers. Millennials and even Gen Z, raised in a digital-first world, began looking backward. Not in resistance to progress, but in search of something real. They wanted meaning in their purchases, not just speed. They wanted to know the name of the person who made their candle, brewed their coffee, or stitched their tote bag. They wanted to feel connected to the maker, to the place, to the moment. And in that desire, Main Street found a second wind. Small towns across America saw a quiet but steady revival. Historic storefronts were repainted, not replaced. Empty buildings became bakeries again. Old general stores reopened as artisan markets. Pop-up shops appeared where dust once gathered. On weekends, farmers' markets filled streets that had long sat empty, and live music returned to corners that had forgotten sound. This wasn't about rejecting technology. It was about balancing it. Slow shopping became an act of intention. Customers lingered again, touching fabrics, tasting samples, talking to vendors. Craft fairs bloomed. Vintage shops thrived. And suddenly, what was once labeled outdated was now called authentic. Even social media helped fuel the shift. Instagram became a stage for the aesthetic of small-town charm-painted brick walls, creaky floors, sunlit windows with hand-lettered signs. What once felt old-fashioned was now curated, photographed, shared, and celebrated. But more than that, the community itself became trendy. Book clubs in coffee shops, art nights in old firehouses, families walking together from shop to shop. People weren't just buying things, they were investing in places again. In this new chapter, Main Street isn't just about nostalgia. It's about restoration. It's about younger generations reclaiming the value of slowness, of knowing your neighbor, of shopping not just for things, but for experience. No, it doesn't look exactly like it did in the 1950s, and it probably never will. But in a time when so much feels disposable, Main Street is beginning to stand for something lasting once again. Because no matter how much changes, one truth still holds. Main Street isn't just a place. It's a feeling, and in some towns, it's coming back to life. Through the decades, America watched its heart shift. From handshakes to scanners, creaky floorboards to tiled megastores, handwritten signs to glowing screens. It was a slow and sometimes painful unraveling, one door closing at a time, one quiet farewell after another. But Main Street was never just a row of shops. It was rhythm, ritual. The smell of bread in the morning, the jingle of the bell when you walked through the door, the knowing nod of someone who remembered your name. It was where stories began, tiny ones, shared over counters and checkout lines, stitched into the everyday. Even when it faded, it never truly disappeared. It lingered in memory in the smell of old leather, the way sunlight hits a wooden floor, the sound of laughter spilling from a diner booth. And now, in towns both big and small, something familiar is stirring. A quiet return to the places that once defined us. Maybe we needed to lose it to see what we missed. Maybe we had to move faster, shop cheaper, click quicker to understand the cost. Because underneath all the convenience, we still longed for connection, for meaning, for something that felt like home. Main Street is that feeling. A place where you're not anonymous, where things take time, where the past doesn't vanish, it lives beside the present. It's not about rejecting progress, but honoring the foundation beneath it. And now, as more people revisit their roots, digitize their memories, or walk into a long-forgotten store turned cozy cafe, they're remembering what mattered all along. Some are opening shops in buildings their grandparents once owned. Others are preserving stories through photo albums, memory boxes, or simply by gathering and talking face to face. There's beauty in the blend where a handmade candle sits beside an iPad, where the past and present shake hands instead of trading places. Main Street never really left us. We just forgot to notice it. In between the rush and the restlessness, it waited quietly, patient like an old friend on a familiar bench. And now, some are finding their way back. If Main Street meant something to you, share your favorite memory in the comments. Because remembering is how we bring it back.